Throughout the Stormlight archive, legendary and mythological characters are referenced, teased, and eventually even appear on screen. The Heralds of the Almighty helped shape the world before histories were written. Sadly, much of the Heralds' history was lost to time, and without their assistance, it's yet to be determined whether our protagonists will be able to survive their confrontation with evil. Now, this is your jumping off point if you are looking to avoid spoilers for any of the books listed here on the screen. This video does not consider or cover any potential preview chapters that may have come out by the time this video is published. Today, we will review the status of each of the Heralds as of the end of Rhythm of War, so that we may understand their likely paths in the 5th installment of the series. Major plot points pivot on many of these characters, so you'll want to know exactly who and where they are as you begin your journey in Wind and Truth. If you haven't checked out our other videos on the main characters of the Stormlight archive as we head into Wind and Truth, make sure to add those to your queue. These videos wouldn't be possible without the awesome fan art from the incredible artists of the Cosmere community. Links to each of the artists' accounts can be found in the description. Check them out. Alright, let's check out the Heralds of the Almighty. The 10 Heralds of the Almighty are pillars of the world of Roshar, and have impacted the world in uncountable ways since their arrival on Roshar. The most obvious way, of course, was the Oath Pact, which imprisoned Odium and the Fused at the expense of the Herald's souls to end each desolation. They had extraordinary powers, with surges granted to them via their honor blades by Honor himself. The orders of the Knights Radiant were modeled after each Herald, with each Herald eventually becoming a patron of an order. The Heralds were able to return from death, following a period of imprisonment in damnation on the barren planet called Braze. It is here that the Heralds were able to hold the Fused back from returning to Roshar using the Oath Pact, until one gave in to the Fused torture, allowing for both Herald and Fused to return. But it seemed that only one needed to be sent to damnation for the Oath Pact to function, and one had never broken, despite centuries of fighting: Taln. Their betrayal of one of their own was made out of desperation, as they feared they could no longer continue to fight. Each abandoned their oath and their honor blade, damning the strongest among them to millennia of torture. Leaving Taln to suffer in their place at Aharietiam allowed humans to rebuild society without the persistent wars between humans and singers, which he thanked Ash for upon his return to Roshar, despite the torture. But this betrayal was kept secret from mankind, so they would believe they had won for good, ending the cycles of desolations. Given their long list of accomplishments and accolades, including the false story of victory, the Heralds are legends in almost every Rosharan religion. The Vorin calendar uses their names as numerals for days of the week, week numbers, and months. Their names are used as curses in many cultures, but the actual people behind the legends are as flawed as any other. They have lived thousands of years, though their exact ages are not known, which has led to consequences for each individual. Since each Herald has now far outlived their normal lifespan, they have almost all lost their minds in some way. Despite their collective madness, they are still capable of superhuman moments, like catching arrows from shard bows, even without their honor blades. So now, we'll discuss each Herald's recent history and likely future. Arguably the most important Herald by the end of Rhythm of War, Ishar has been busy for the last several years. The Herald of Luck was able to take control of the country of Tukar, in the Makabak region south of Urithiru, leading the country as their god priest. Ishar used the alias of Tazim in Tukar, obfuscating the presence of a Herald, and led the Tukari people in a war against Imul, the country between Tukar and Urithiru. Luckily, Ash confirmed to Dalinar and Yasna that Tazim was in fact Ishar, patron herald of bondsmiths. This was Dalinar's focus throughout Rhythm of War, to keep his promises to his coalition, attempting to retake Imul from the Odium's forces, who took advantage of the ongoing Tukari-Imuli conflict. Once Dalinar's coalition broke through Odium's forces, he attempted to meet with Ishar, but as we discussed, the Herald has gone mad, turning the meeting into a confrontation. Ishar attempts to steal Dalinar's bond with the Stormfather, only for Szeth to stop him with Nightblood, who notably takes a chip out of Ishar's honor blade. Ishar escapes through a perpendicularity, but in a moment of clarity, sends a message via connection manipulation to Dalinar, instructing him to meet him in Shinovar, where he thinks he can reset the Oath Pact. Before he can complete the message, Ishar's voice shifts back to crazed, and he begins accusing Dalinar of being Odium's champion. Szeth is distraught, as the fact that Ishar is wielding his own honor blade means the Herald confronted Szeth's father, Neturo. Ishar says that he let Neturo die, saying that the Shin returned the sword to the Herald after he saved them from the Unmade, indicating that Shinovar is the current residence of one or more of the Unmade. As if that weren't enough world-altering information, Dalinar and his Radiant forces discover a tent with Spren who had been pulled into the physical realm, including experimentation notes and procedures. These detailed the suffering of the Spren during the process, and the longevity of survival once pulled out of the cognitive realm. Ishar is now an unchained bondsmith with his honor blade, and has gone completely insane. The progress of his disturbing work and his state in Shinovar when Szeth and Kaladin reach him is uncertain until the Skybreaker makes his pilgrimage home. Szeth's former instructor and herald of his Radiant Order, Nale, has been the most active herald since the story began. As Herald of Justice, he has taken it upon himself, at the suggestion of Ishar, to rid Roshar of any budding radiance outside of the Skybreaker Order. He attempted to kill Lift on multiple occasions, but was unsuccessful due to Lift's heroics in Azimir and the Everstorm's arrival in Yedah. He has since chosen to fight for the Singers, who he sees as the rightful owners of Roshar. In Rhythm of War, he confronts Dalinar in Emul, where Dalinar is able to use his bondsmith powers to view some of Nale's memories. Nale joining the Oath Pact at Jezrien's request, becoming a Skybreaker, enacting the Vorin Rite of Travel, and abandoning the Oath Pact he swore to with Jezrien, all become visible to Dalinar. The Blackthorn's ability frightens Nale from the battlefield, but both men are able to see a line of connection between the two, symbolizing the Oath Pact. Nale was also heavily involved in Gavilar's Sons of Honor and was instrumental in suggesting the Parshendi use Szeth to kill Gavilar because Nale feared the return of the Desolations. Nale was the one who gave Venli the permission to attack the Alethi on the night of Gavilar's assassination, suspecting that the return of the Void Spren Ulim was due to Gavilar's actions. Now that he has been confronted by the return of the Desolations, he is mostly a wild card fighting for the Singers, but he promised Szeth that he would return to teach the Shin Skybreaker the Surge of Division. It's possible Nale meets the Assassin in White in his homeland of Shinovar in Wind and Truth, despite his opposition in the war. One of the closest heralds to Nale throughout the millennia since Aharietiam is Kalak, who we have observed multiple times in the palace in Kholinar on the night of Gavilar's assassination. Since then, he has been running the Sons of Honor under the alias of Restaries, though the Sons of Honor have mostly been stamped out as of early Rhythm of War. Kalak has been looking for a way to leave Roshar, and used his Sons of Honor organization as a way for him to achieve this. Restaries is Shallan's quarry for the Ghostbloods, wielding a knife similar to the one used to kill Jezrien. But she is unaware his true identity is the patron herald of Will Shapers, nor were many of the leaders of the Sons of Honor, including Amaram. Of note, Kalak, as Restaries, was the one who convinced Amaram to take Kaladin's shards prior to his enslavement. It's unclear how Kaladin would react to such a revelation. Recently, Kalak has been presiding over the Honor Spren stronghold of lasting integrity under the title of High Judge. His judgment is compromised throughout Adolin's trial to prove that Radiant Spren should bond again, and ultimately it is only Maya's revelation that the Radiants and Spren chose to abandon their oaths together that saves Adolin and convinces the Honor Spren. Following the trial, Shallan attempts to fulfill her mission for the Ghostbloods, but decides against trapping Kalak in the gemstone. The Herald details the greater Cosmere to Shallan, which she annotates in her journal before confronting Mraize. Shallan will search for the gemstone trapping one of the Unmade, Ba Edo Mishram, who we'll cover in the next video, and attempt to find it before Mraize and the Ghostbloods do. Kalak is also invested in this search. His letters that make up the epigraphs of Part 4 of Rhythm of War show that he believes they need to release her to heal a terrible wound on all Spren, Singers, and Roshar. We'll have to see whether Kalak will be involved directly in the search for the instigator of the false desolation, or perhaps join the coalition, but his admitted cowardice may lead him to fleeing once again. Kalak was our point of view for the prelude to the Stormlight Archive, the final herald to abandon his honor blade at Aharietiam, when he agreed with Jezrien that they must doom Taln to solitude. This may become important in the future of the series as we continue to uncover secrets about the heralds who have gone mad in the thousands of years since the events of the prelude. Taln remains catatonic since his brief moment of clarity at the Battle of Thalen Field, and has been of little help to the Coalition's efforts since his return. While he was the best fighter among the heralds before the Oath Pact was abandoned, he has only shown a brief moment when catching poison darts in the war camps near the end of Words of Radiance. As patron herald of the Stone Wards and herald of war, Taln could add a significant boost to the Coalition forces on the battlefield, but the location of his honor blade is unknown. Despite 4,500 years of torture, Taln never gave in according to Nale, so what sent him back to Roshar? Ash takes care of Taln in his madness, attempting to protect the one she betrayed. Ash brings him to the interviews that Jasnah and Navani request, though Taln is of no help in providing answers. Since joining the Coalition, the patron herald of Lightweavers has provided Jasnah with historical details that Varistitalians thought would be subject of debate forever. Despite her association with Shallan's Radiant Order, she displays more Dustbringer qualities, having destroyed as many depictions of the Herald of Beauty as she could find, which we saw in various interludes in previous books. Ash's father, Jezrien, Herald of Kings and patron herald of the Windrunners, was killed following the Battle of Thalen Field. At the instruction of the Fused and Kholinar with a knife made of the god metal Rasium, Moash was tasked with the murder of the Herald, a pillar of Vorinism. Moash found Jezrien in the gardens near the palace, crazed and disheveled. This was Dalinar's drinking partner at the depths of his agony before the Blackthorn sought the old magic. The traitor to Bridge 4 stabbed the man in the stomach, and Jezrien did not know what was happening to him. This effectively captured the herald in the gemstone at the pommel of the knife, but according to Kalak, his soul faded away without connection to Roshar and the other heralds. Even with Yzerza Ilin gone, Ishar thinks there is some way to restore the Oath Pact. That rounds out the heralds we've seen on screen so far, all 5 men and 1 woman. Aside from Ash, the other 4 female heralds have not been directly identified to date. Taravangian postulates that Dova, a member of the diagram, is Battar, patron herald of Elsecolors. Dova had been a loyal servant to the diagram as an ardent in Kharbranth, assisting with death rattle recordings and written communications. This included direct involvement in the Eliastile, which was part of Taravangian's attempt to force Dalinar from leadership of the Coalition at the end of Oathbringer. By the time Taravangian is ready to give himself to Dalinar's forces as a traitor, he instructs his close circle not to trust Dova, or Bata as he calls her, due to the mental state of the Coalition heralds Taln and Ash. But this identity is still not confirmed. Vedel, patron herald of Edge Dancers, and Pailiah, patron herald of the Truth Watchers, have been completely absent from the story so far. Their whereabouts and activities since Aharietiam are unknown, though they are certainly alive, as the other heralds would know if there were a change in their numbers, as they did when Jezrien was taken from them. But the most talked about herald since Rhythm of War's release is Chanarach, herald of the Common Man and patron herald of the Dustbringers. There are several theories of Channa's identity, including the assassin Lys from Jasnah's prologue in Words of Radiance, but the more interesting potential identity of Chanarach is Shallan's mother. The theory of Shallan's heraldic parentage is one of the more popular theories in the fandom, which may have started from the depiction of Chanarach with red hair, similar to Shallan's. We know that Shallan killed her mother, likely with her original Lightweaver spren, Testament, and it seems from Shallan's flashbacks that her mother identified her only daughter as a Radiant. This led Brightness Devar to contact one of the Skybreakers, led by Nale, who were hunting down budding Radiants. Channa would do anything to not go back to damnation after abandoning the Oath Pact at Aharietiam, including killing her own daughter. But Shallan killed her mother when confronted, and abandoned her oath to Testament in the aftermath. This later became one of Shallan's progressive moments when she absorbed Veil's personality, remembering these truths. Once again, according to Nale, Taln never broke, and it's possible that another herald was sent to damnation and gave in to the torture, returning Taln and that new herald both to Roshar. The timeline of events seems to line up roughly with when Shallan killed her mother and when Voidspren returned to Roshar to begin guiding Venli to bring the Everstorm. There have been no descriptions of women matching Shallan's mother since the murder in the Devar household, but it is possible Chanarach has returned to Roshar, according to this theory. It's unclear whether anyone else was aware of Brightness Devar's true identity prior to her death, or if this is really true of the character at all. Hopefully we will find out more about Shallan and her secrets in Wind and Truth. There is another theory about the Devar household that an unmade was affecting the residents throughout Shallan's childhood, which we'll touch on in the next video. So where does that leave us going into the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive, Wind and Truth? The Heralds of the Almighty, now more known to our heroes than ever, will certainly play a role. Ishar, Kalak, and Nale seem most likely to impact the story directly, though Ash and Taln could assist the coalition in smaller ways. The rest of the heralds are in hiding, or gone altogether in Jezrien's case, but the identity of Shallan's mother may play a factor in her path. With all that in mind, what do you think happens in Wind and Truth? What are your predictions for the heralds? Leave a comment below. If you have questions about the content or art used in this video, post them in the comments as well. We hope this has been helpful in reviewing the playing field ahead of the largest Stormlight Archive novel published to date, with likely the largest Sanderlanche in the Cosmere so far. Don't forget to watch our final 2 Wind and Truth prep videos covering the Unmade and the Shards of Roshar, as well as the Contest of Champions. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe for future videos. After all, we need to unarchive all these secrets.